Last Friday, we had a wonderful time studying the School of the Cross. And I made the comment because people were saying, Pastor, we want you to put in the Last Supper. And I'm sitting there thinking that's at least 3 more hours of teaching. And then when you put in the Last Supper, then there's all the teaching that happened after they left the upper room while they were walking to the Garden of Gethsemane. And so that's a whole nother set of teaching. And I'm just thinking, you never run out of Bible to teach. Now, there's something that happened in the Garden of Gethsemane I did not teach you last week because I wanted to save it for today. Do you remember when I told you we don't know all the reasons why the disciples fell asleep? Well, let me give you probably one of the primary ones. Luke 22, verse 45. At last he stood up again and returned to his disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. Exhausted from grief. Now, why were the disciples full of grief? Well, he kept telling them that he's about to die. He kept telling them he's about to suffer. They've just seen Judas walk out on them after he was exposed as the betrayer, someone that they had been with for the last 3.5 years. There's lots of reasons for their grief, but the truth I want you to see is that grief is exhausting. Now, we all know this. Have you ever watched a child cry until they cried themselves asleep? That grief was exhausting. Have you ever cried yourself asleep after the death of a loved one? Grief is exhausting. Now, I bring it up to say this. During COVID, we couldn't do all the funerals that needed to be done. But now that the restrictions are lifted, we've been doing a lot of funerals. People who had loved ones cremated and then just kept at home and waited until relatives could come over and we could have a funeral together and have an interment together. But one of the things I keep talking to families about is the need to rest. Grief doesn't look like it should be exhausting, but it is. Grief is probably the most exhausting emotion in the human soul. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Joy perks you up. Joy peps you up. But grief is physically exhausting. Now, for those of you that have lost a loved one, a husband, a wife, a child, a parent in these last 2 years, would you be a little bit more gracious with yourself? Would you give yourself a little slack and recognize that grief does have an effect on your energy levels. And you need to get a little bit more sleep. You need to get more rest because it not only exhausts you, but it'll break you down physically. Get the rest you need in Jesus' name.